We're speaking to Ronnie Falconer from CIWEM in the United Kingdom. Mr. Falconer, can you briefly tell us about your organisation?
CIWEM is the Chartered Institution of Water and Environmental Management. It's one of the major players in the European Water Association. We have about 10,000 members in the UK, but collectively the European Water Association has really access to about 250,000 professionals throughout Europe. So really the European Water Association is a major way of bringing professionals together in the environmental matters and indeed in flooding matters, which is a very serious issue in Europe at the moment.
As you mentioned, the theme today is floods. Can you tell us a little bit about the floods directive? How is it progressing? How has its implementation been progressing?
Well, I think the floods directive goes down as one of the, it has the honour, I think, of being one of the fastest directives that's gone through the whole process of all directives. Now that really reflects the seriousness of the situation with flooding in Europe. I think it's recognised that with climate change, flooding and the major consequences it can have has the potential to not only affect many people, but could even undermine the economy quite severely in Europe if nothing is done about it. But the European Commission has recognised that and is taking the issue very seriously.
This is the 5th EWA conference taking place in Brussels. You mentioned that the fact of climate change, the reality of it, has obviously affected how you approach this issue. Have you noticed a progressive change over the past few years?
Well, I think really, I'd say 10 years ago there was still an element of doubt. There is clearly, everybody recognises that climate change is a major challenge, and particularly in flooding. So there are two strands of responding to that. There's mitigation and there is also adaptation. Now, adaptation is really looking at the measures. We have to accept that certain elements of climate change are a reality. There's very little that we can do in the short term about sea level rise. The mitigation measures that we put in place are going to be very long term, but very positive and have to be done. But in the short term, we have to implement measures to respond to the impacts that we're undoubtedly going to have in Europe. One of these impacts that I'm particularly involved in is the problem of surface water flooding, particularly in urban areas. And in that respect, European Water Association organised an expert meeting just last week on this very topic to try and tease out the key issues with surface water flooding, but also very importantly to try and achieve a common understanding of what it means and the potential impact across Europe.
Surface water and pluvial flooding is something you will discuss in your intervention today at the conference. Can you go into some more detail about what specifically you will discuss with the group?
Well, first of all, I'll try and explain what it means, and really it's flooding due to very high intensity rainfall, almost tropical intensity rainfall. Some people call them superstorms. And these can either be individual storm events, or they can be very high intensity storm events, high intensity rainfall within longer duration events. The UK has suffered very badly from this in the summer of 2007, when there's many million pounds worth of damage right across the UK, but particularly in Hull and Sheffield due to this type of flooding. And quite honestly, we just weren't prepared for it. We had been able to recognise the risk from both coastal and river flooding, but flooding out of the sky from direct rainfall before it ever gets to a river or drain just hadn't really been recognised. It's not necessarily a new thing, but it's going to get worse with climate change, and pluvial flooding is the issue that I'm going to be talking about today.
A subject we keep hearing about is how the Floods Directive and the Water Directive relate to each other and how they may or may not overlap. Can you tell us a little bit about how that issue is, how it currently stands and how it may progress in the future?
Well, yes, the two directives, the Water Framework Directive and the Floods Directive, really go hand in hand. The Water Framework Directive is really concerned about protecting the environment and the quality of our water. Floods Directive, as it says, is about protecting us from the very major effects of flooding. And you think that there may well be situations where they're at odds with each other, but they're not really. Because if I give you an example, sustainable urban drainage systems are one of the measures that we use to respond to surface water flooding. And these measures can have a benefit both to the quality of the water in terms of treating the runoff, but also attenuating flooding. Another issue that is common to both directives is sustainability. Sustainability in the Floods Directive is all about looking at a catchment-wide approach right across the whole of the area and looking at measures that right up in perhaps changes in agricultural practices or land use at the top of the catchment might well have a benefit to the urban areas lower down in the catchment. This is a term that's now called natural flood management, and it very much underpins the type of sustainable approach that we're applying these days.
Is it fair to say that the Water Framework Directive and the Floods Directive are some of the more comprehensive and progressive pieces of EU legislation in terms of sustainability?
Well, I think, yes, you've said it. I say the importance of both directives and what they're going to result in the end of the day has been recognised. Some people call the Floods Directive a daughter directive of the Water Framework Directive. I would beg to differ. I think that both are equally important, but both work hand in hand with each other.
Finally, you'll be sharing of your own expertise today. Is that what you hope will be the major outcome of this conference, that people can exchange best practice, exchange their own experiences and so on?
Exactly. I mean, the Working Group F, which I sit on, is all to do with implementation of the Floods Directive. European Water Association is very pleased to be playing a role in bringing professionals and others that are involved in flood management together to share experiences. I'm always amazed that of just how in different parts of Europe we can have different experiences that we don't necessarily know about. There's a good example in Hungary, where at first Hungary thought, well, we don't have pluvial flooding. Then when we talked about it a bit more, we realised that what they call excess water flooding is the same thing as surface water flooding. And they have a vast amount of information, very valuable records on that. So that's just a good example how bringing people together, bringing those that are involved in flood management, can mean that we can respond to this very major challenge of climate change adaptation to the risk of flooding.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.